Updating your receiver may seem like a small step, but I assure you it's a crucial process in maintaining functionality and keeping your features fully up to date when dealing with Kenwood receivers. If you think about a little device that we all use each and every day, your cell phone, which is the #1 device connected to your receiver. Now we could get into the whole Apple versus Android thing here, but there's no point because the reality is both of those devices update all the time. And when that cell phone updates, odds are your receiver might have some changes it needs at the same time. So if you haven't figured it out by now, this video is going to be discussing how to update your Kenwood receiver. Let's take a look at just how easy this process is. Finding your receiver's update can be as simple as just heading over to Google and typing in your receiver's model number. So for this example, I'll be using the DMX8709S, and then I'll type in firmware update to follow. Now once we go here, you'll see a few things come up. I always click on the first one that usually starts with the word support, as you see here on the left-hand side. Now whenever we click this, it'll take us to our page which holds all of our software and firmware updates. Now as an added bonus, you may notice in this case, we also get the manuals. Right next to that where it says software and firmware is where we want to click. And once we do that, down at the very bottom, you'll see a link that says firmware updates at the very end. When we click on this, it'll take us to the page which holds the firmware updates for the DMX8709S. Now in this case, I'd like to point out something that's very important. Some receivers do have system and application updates. If you look at the top here, you'll notice it's defaulted to system firmware update, but on the right-hand side of that, we can click where it says application updates. Now when we scroll down a little bit further, my favorite, best friend that I love pointing out to people when we're talking about updates is our firmware update guide link. It's actually going to open up our firmware update guide. Now this is an incredibly resourceful tool to know about. It'll show us how to format our USB, it'll show us how to check and see what version our receiver has to make sure that it even needs the update, and it'll show us how to structure the hierarchy on the USB itself. So let me show you a few examples of what I mean by that. Right here, you can see that this says DMX809S and the DMX8709S. Version 116 or earlier needs to go to version 117. So we can head over to our receiver, double check that by following the steps that are indicated in the section of this guide titled Checking the Firmware Version. Now once we've done these steps, we can verify that the application version in this case does not match 117. So that lets us know that we need to get an update applied to our receiver. When we scroll a little bit further down, you'll also notice in bright red text there are some stipulations to how the USB drive needs to be formatted and what size USB needs to be used in order to apply this update. So to take a closer look at that, you'll see the capacity of your USB has to be between 8 gigs and 32 gigs. Now, when I get tech calls about this problem, I always ask what size drive. And on the 8 gig side of things, you have to make sure that you have at least 8 gigs of free space. So to be safe, I typically recommend using a 16 gigabyte drive. That way we know we've got plenty of storage for this update to happen. The other part to that is making sure that your USB is on the proper format. Now in this case, you'll notice it says file system needs to be FAT32. The only time that this traditionally is in the wrong format is if you formatted the USB on a MacBook. Windows defaults to a FAT32 file system. However, it's really important to make sure that we're checking all of these boxes when we're getting our updates applied. I'll show you how to set all that up here in just a moment. If we navigate back to the other screen that we were just on, down here at the bottom, you'll notice an agree and download click. So let's go ahead and click that now to start our update. So once the download is completed, you'll notice that it downloads as a zipped folder. Now this is a perfect opportunity to show you two great things. One, how to format your USB to make sure that it's set up and ready for the files. And two, how to extract those files. That way they're put onto the USB the right time on the very first try. So with this USB connected, we can right click on this where it says Properties. We can then scroll up to see Format. Now when we open this up, we want to make sure that the file system says FAT32 like we saw in the firmware update guide earlier. So once we've verified that, Make sure that we have at least 8 gigs of free space, as we can see here at the very top. Then we'll click on Start. It will let you know that it's going to erase everything off of the USB. We'll hit OK. We'll close here. Now we'll go to our zipped folder. Now with our zipped folder, we want to extract those files. And there's a fast way to do it to put it directly onto the USB the right way. We'll scroll over here to where it says Extract All. Once we click that, it'll open up a separate window. We can click Browse. Now when we click Browse, you'll notice we can select the USB drive, which has nothing on it now, directly from this window. We'll hit Select Folder, and then we'll click Extract. Okay, this window will automatically close once that extraction process is complete. We can click on the USB drive, and we can see that there is one file on the drive itself, the ispboot.bin file. Now I always recommend cross-referencing this to the firmware update guide that we talked about just a moment ago. So if we go back to that, we open this up. Here on this side of the screen, you'll notice this shows you the USB hierarchy and how it should be structured. In a lot of cases, the most common call about this is this file will be inside of a folder, for example. Whereas here we can see on this firmware update guide, it should just be the file. So at this point, we can right-click on the USB, scroll up to where it says Eject, and get ready to put our USB in the receiver and get this receiver updated. Now I'm assuming when you're doing this process, you'll be in your vehicle looking at your receiver screen. However, in this case, I have a DMX8709S fired up on the bench. The first thing we want to do is go to Menu, Setup, and then select System. Now we want to scroll down to the very bottom, and where it says System Information, we want to press Enter. Now remember when we looked at that firmware update guide, the application version said that it needed to be 117. In this case, we can see this DMX8709S needs the application update. So now that we verified that, on the back side of the receiver, there is a USB input. You can take the USB, plug it into that input, and then press the button that says Update. There'll be some prompts that will appear on the screen letting you know that the update is getting ready to start. Now it's totally normal for the screen to go black. Once you give the update just a few seconds, you'll see the receiver power back up. It's important to know that throughout this process, you do not disconnect power. Make sure that your receiver has full power the entire time it's getting the update off of the USB. Now, full disclosure, this process can take about 5 minutes. In some cases, it may go a little bit faster, depending on the speed of your USB. However, in this case, I'm going to do a quick time lapse just so we can get through the update, make sure that everything is good to go. As you can see here, once the update is complete, the receiver will reboot, and you can go through, set your settings, hit Finish, and we'll go back into the menu to double check, make sure that the update took by going to System, scroll to the bottom, select System Information, and here we can see that the application version is now 117. So now that you know how to update your receiver, the next question is, how do you find out about the updates? Realistically, you can always find these on our website. However, we do not expect each and every customer to go to our website as a part of their morning routine. That's why I want to tell you about our consumer e-news, because this is an impactful source that we offer that allows you to be in the know, on the go, of all things Kenwood. So here at Kenwood, we put a lot of effort into our resources, because resources help all of us. Now in this case, this is an example of what our connected news looks like. You'll see different categories where we talk about what's new. Maybe it's new videos similar to this one that have come out to be able to help everybody throughout the process. Or we'll highlight different features and new receivers. For example, a new fast startup demo video you see here. But if you scroll down to the very bottom and you get through all the great news that we're excited to share with all of you, you'll notice a section that typically highlights which receiver firmware updates have come out and how to access those as well. For example, here you'll see we have a list of products. So if you're watching this video and you have one of these receivers, this is a great time to follow the steps in this video to get that update applied. Now the next part of this is how do you sign up for our connected news? I'll put a link in the description that takes you directly to the sign up for our connected news. But at the bottom of any of our connected news emails, you have the ability to click right here where it says subscribe, enter your information, and then you will be in the know at all times for anything and everything Kenwood. Thanks for taking the time to join us in this video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Kenwood.